Good evening. My name is Tim Andrews, your moderator tonight, and thank you for joining Congressman Fred Keller's live telephone town hall. During this discussion, Congressman Keller will provide an update on legislative priorities and bills introduced this Congress, and he'll be taking as many of your questions as possible. If you'd like to ask the Congressman a question at any point during this event, simply press *3 on your telephone keypad, and a member of our team will place you in queue to speak with the Congressman. Now, if you're streaming this event online, you can simply type your name and question right below the streaming player. Again, we'll get to as many questions as we can to this evening, but let's kick off this evening's discussion with a few opening remarks from Congressman Keller. Congressman?
Good evening, and thank you for joining us for our 9th telephone town hall. It's always wonderful to have so many on the call from all across Pennsylvania's 12th Congressional District. These events are tailored so our team can build a more responsive operation for you, and so that you know what's happening in Washington and where we stand on the issues. The only way for us to get it right in Washington is to be present in our local community, engaging directly with the people we represent. Please know that our team will take the feedback we get on tonight's call and put it into action. If you do have a question at any point during the call, please press *3 to submit it. Questions are already being submitted as we speak. Before we jump into the question and answer portion, I'd like to briefly go over some of the priorities and what we've been working on since our last telephone town hall in March. Several items supporting our veterans. Our veterans and our active duty military have done so much in protecting our freedom and our way of life. They deserve us to stand up for them. That's why when we learned of the issue with the National Personal Records Center and our veterans not being able to get the care and the documents they needed to get the care they've earned, we went into action right away, contacting the National Personnel Records Center and submitting letters with my colleagues and actually introducing legislation. And I am going to announce that they are looking at getting back up to 100% capacity as far as staffing to start putting together a plan to address the issue to make sure that our veterans get the care they need. But that is due to the input that we got from people across PA-12 and also the work that our team has done to make sure that our veterans get the care and services they've earned and deserve. So that was one thing. The other thing is, we're looking at the agriculture industry and proud to sponsor some legislation with Congressman G.T. Thompson, the Healthy Milk for Healthy Kids Act, to make sure that our kids in school will have access to 2% milk. It'll be more than just skim milk, but they'll have access to that. We have the Give Milk Act, which helps with getting milk and offering milk to mothers and children on the WIC program to have, again, that nutritious milk that has more than 1% milk fat in it. Also, with that, I'm working with Congressman John Joyce on the Dairy Pride Act, which actually would make the FDA label products appropriately so that the consumers know that milk is milk and things produced from almonds and oranges and so forth are juice and they're not milk. So sounds like it's a common sense thing, but unfortunately we have to make sure that the labels accurately represent what's in the containers for the public. Other things that we've been working on is securing our southern border. We know that since January, President Biden has reversed many of the policies that were put in place in 2019, and we're actually being effective in making sure that our southern border was secure, and particularly during a pandemic. And when we learned what was happening, I went with many of my colleagues to the border to talk to the people that are in charge of keeping the border secure, the Border Patrol agents. We went to the ports of entry, and we also went to the intake center, and also met with, in Luna County, New Mexico, met with the sheriff, and also the families that live along the border. And What we heard from all of them is the policies that were put in place were effective. The wall worked. The agreements, and here it is, talk about diplomacy. President Trump had worked out agreements with the Northern Triangle countries, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, on immigration. The Remain in Mexico policy was effective, and the President worked on that with, President Trump worked on that with Mexico, and President Biden reversed those policies, and that's why we've seen some of the things that we've seen unfold at the border. The first thing that can be done, though, is to make sure that we reinstate those policies. I know our Vice President, Kamala Harris, was at the border after she had actually gone past the border to Guatemala and Mexico and discussed those issues. But we needed to hear from Americans what they were experiencing. And the Vice President, she said that these problems have been going on for 30 years, and we need to have legislation on immigration reform. Well, I have this to say about that. We know we've had problems for a lot of years, and the policies that were put in place in 2019, because we had a president in President Trump that secured the southern border and took it seriously, and actually looked at protecting that, and those policies were working and they were undone. So we can talk about immigration reform, but we're seeing right now record high numbers and 20-year highs in many of what we're seeing, and it's really impacting negatively the families that live along the border. When I talk to Joe and Teresa Johnson, they can't go on their ranch without carrying firearms, and they were pleading, they and their neighbors were pleading for the federal government to do its job and secure our border so that they could be more safe in their communities. And so we are continuing to work on that. The other thing is, we all know that we had the year of unmatched that we have not seen in our life with the pandemic, and as Americans have done and always do, we're very resilient, and we're getting through this. And it is because of the ingenuity of Operation Warp Speed that we have the vaccine. It's because that America pulled together. We looked out for our families, our friends, and our neighbors, and we're able to get through this. We're reopening our economy, and Americans are going back to work. But we need to make sure that we hold China accountable. For whatever reason, we know the virus originated in China, and in the past, when it was said it could have escaped from a lab, that was considered, you were not looked upon favorably when you even brought up the question. But now it's coming out that it may have, and whether it did or didn't, the American people, all of us whom have lost family, friends, and neighbors through the virus, really deserve to have answers. And that's why we should be having the investigation. I joined 200 of my colleagues signing a letter to the Speaker to demand a full investigation of COVID-19 and hold the Chinese government responsible. And I tell you what, responsible for controlling the investigation from the World Health Organization, and because they actually had veto power on who could go in there and go out, and also on what was reported. So we owe it to the American people to make sure that we get to the bottom of this, so that this does not happen to another American, another person around the world, that we don't repeat the same thing that's happened. Another priority is, of course, protecting American energy. In Pennsylvania's 12th congressional district, on any given day, up to 10% of the nation's dry natural gas comes out of PA-12. It creates good-paying jobs, and it creates a lot of revenue for local governments, for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and for our nation. And in addition to that, it provides good-paying jobs, and actually companies that contribute to education. Right in Susquehanna County, the Career and Technical School gets money from Cabot Oil and Gas to run their CDL class. They have had help with that with Cabot Oil and Gas, making sure that there's opportunities not just in the gas industry, but for people moving goods, as we've learned during the pandemic, is so important. So we have that. It's a national security issue. In 2019, the first time since 1957, America was energy independent, and we didn't have to be buying energy, natural gas, oil, any kind of energy from foreign governments that do not share the values of the United States or those of our allies. Having the Keystone XL pipeline shut down, in the first week of the Biden administration, while the sanctions were lifted on the Russian Nord Stream 2 pipeline to deliver energy to our allies in Europe, to Germany. We need to really take a look at this, because affordable energy saves the average household in Pennsylvania $1,100 a year on energy costs and provides a national security benefit so that we're not transferring our wealth to nations that don't share the values of the United States or our allies. A couple things on the health care thing. We have the Rural Health Act, which is legislation that we've introduced that would take a look at reevaluating Medicare payments and how they are applied to our rural hospitals and healthcare providers for inpatient services, and making sure that we're getting the equitable share of those reimbursements in rural America. Additionally, I'm working with my colleague Susan Wild from the southeast corner of Pennsylvania, and it's called the Nurses Care Act, which would allow nurses certification for temporary nurses assistants that were working during the pandemic to count toward their certification. It would allow that work to count for that. It's a needed thing so that our people that require care in assisted living facilities have the people ready to care for them should they need it. So those are some of the things that we've been working on. We have an Ems Count Act, which would make sure that within the Department of Labor, we're accurately capturing the amount of people that work in firefighters and EMS personnel in our rural communities, so we get our share of resources to this area from across from the federal government. So those are some of the things we're doing for law enforcement. We have Eric's Law, which I joined Senator Toomey introducing. He introduced in the Senate. And what it does is we had Eric Williams, who was a corrections officer, and unfortunately he was stabbed by an inmate serving a life sentence. So the individual that attacked Eric Williams while he was doing his job had no repercussions of punishment other than, a verdict, of course, was found guilty, but a sentence of the death penalty. And because of one juror, Eric's family didn't get justice. Eric didn't get justice because one juror. So what Eric's Law would do when somebody is found guilty and there is a death sentence case, it would allow for a second jury to review the sentencing. So it doesn't do anything with the verdict. It simply takes a look at the sentencing so that these families of victims of crimes for people who have no repercussion won't see justice unless they have that opportunity. So it allows for that. So I know there's been a lot of things that are going on. We've heard a lot of things on infrastructure. That's what we're going to be working on in the next couple months here in Congress. A lot of discussion. The thing that we need to be most careful of is how we define infrastructure and make sure that we separate infrastructure from some of the things like social programs that others in Washington, D.C. are trying to call infrastructure. Infrastructure, as the leader McCarthy points out so well, is it is our roads, it is our bridges, it is our surface transportation. It's also broadband internet access, it's pipelines, it's water and sewer services to communities. So with that, that's a little bit of an update of things we're working on and what we've been doing since the last time we spoke. And I will now turn it over to the moderator to start asking questions.
Thank you, Congressman. And if you have a question that you would like to ask Congressman Keller and you're joining us on your telephone, simply press *3 on your telephone keypad, and that'll get you in queue. If you're joining us online, you can simply type your question right below the streaming player. Just type in your name and your question. And Congressman, we're going to start with an online question this evening. It comes from Jim Nolan, who joined us online, and he was hoping you could talk a little bit more about the priorities of the Prison Reform Caucus.
Okay, actually, a great question. we looked at forming the Prison Reform Caucus during COVID-19 when the Bureau of Prisons from Washington, D.C. was making decisions to shift inmates around within the United States from one facility to another. And in PA-12 at Lewisburg and Allenwood, they were actually moving patients in there that were COVID positive. And as it is, as we're engaged with the community and we learn things, we need to make sure that the people that keep us safe have the tools and resources necessary to do their job, and that the agency that oversees the operation of these facilities is accountable. And that wasn't happening with the Bureau of Prisons. So really, we started a Bureau of Prisons caucus. It's bipartisan, and there's members from across the nation. And what we're doing is we are working to make sure that the corrections officers have the tools. During COVID, that's sort of what started it. We got going. Of course, we started again in this Congress, and we're also looking at staffing levels and the plan that the Bureau of Prisons has to make sure that our corrections officers aren't being burned out by working too many hours, too much overtime. And we've had some great partners within the Bureau of Prisons. Shane Fozzie, who is the one union representative, has been outstanding in making sure that we're connected well with what needs to happen for recruitment, retention, also staffing levels. So right now we're working on making sure that the people that keep us safe, not just within the walls of that prison, but in our community, have the tools and resources they need. And right now we're working on staffing issues and accountability there with the Bureau of Prisons.
Let's go to one of our live callers from Bradford. We have Nancy Schrader on the line. Thank you, ma'am, for holding. You're live with the Congressman.
Thank you, Congressman. We appreciate what you're doing on behalf of your constituents. But my question is, I really have trepidations about this infrastructure bill, but I know we need to improve our infrastructure because I drive on the highways and over the bridges, and I know there's problems on our interstates, and that needs to be addressed, and I wondered what your feeling was about this bill.
Well, I know there's been a lot of discussion, and thank you, Nancy, for the question. And I do agree with you. We do need to focus on our infrastructure, and I was part of that when we did it in Harrisburg and helped work on things in the Commonwealth. The bill that we're doing, and it's always, you always got to look at everything that's contained in the bill, and that's why I think it's so important first to define infrastructure and make sure that we're not including social programs in infrastructure. Not that social programs aren't important, but that's a different discussion. We're talking about infrastructure, and we need to make sure that when we tell the American people we're working on an infrastructure bill, it deals with that. The current bill, and actually we're going to be, the House is working on a bill, the Democrats in the House are working on a bill that is, $1 trillion. The plan that we've been working on in the Republican conference is about $400 billion, and it focuses on those things that we would call infrastructure, which would be broadband internet access in rural America. It would be roads and bridges. It would be gas pipelines. It would be water and sewer lines. So it would be those things that would be infrastructure. The bill that you look at that they're being talked about, over 50% of it has to do with Green New Deal priorities and not fixing the existing infrastructure. So just a really lot of things that we need to be working on there, and again, focusing on making sure we deliver what we tell the people we're working on, and that is infrastructure. And if we do a good infrastructure bill, that will help our economy, and that will help all of us do better.
Congressman, we're going to go back to an online question. John from Selinsgrove writes that he hasn't yet received his third stimulus payment and is wondering what should he do next.
John, I want to say on behalf of the administration, there's a couple things I want to say that we should look at this. The IRS is still distributing millions of third stimulus payments each week. You can check the status online for info on when to expect the direct deposit or paper check in the mail. If you need help navigating that, please contact us at keller.house.gov. and a member of our team will make sure that we can point you in the right direction and connect you with the agency if you need assistance with that.
Back to the phones we go. If you have a question for the Congressman, simply press *3 on your telephone keypad. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can this evening. Joyce Wilson is on the line right now. Hi, Joyce. Thanks for holding. Where are you calling from tonight?
Montgomery, Pennsylvania.
Good to have you.
Thank you.
Go right ahead. You're live with Congressman.
Thank you, Congressman, for your service. And I would like to know, I believe that there are 11 states that have already discontinued the $300 supplement income to unemployment. If you would, and I'm sure you drive around Pennsylvania, but everywhere you go, it's needed, help needed, additional bonuses for hiring on. When is this going to end, the $300 to help our state and the unemployment problem? And the other question I have is, why is Congress defending Gwen Berry? Why should anyone stand up and represent our nation and turn her back on the flag?
Well, let me first take the unemployment question. I'll take that first since that's how you asked it. There's actually 25 states now that have discontinued the additional $300. And looking at that, under the President Biden's American Rescue Plan, that runs until the beginning of September. And the best stimulus is a job, and we need to make sure that we safely reopen our economy. And I have the confidence in the people all across PA-12, all across our Commonwealth and across our nation. Americans are resilient, thoughtful people, that we can do it safely. And that's why I didn't support. That's one of the reasons I didn't support that plan, because I knew we could start getting back to work. We'd seen it happen. We had seen that happen before, and so I know we can do that. I would just encourage people, as jobs are available, do what you can to participate and get back into the workforce. As far as the flag, I tell you the flag stands for so much great, and here's the whole thing. We should respect our flag because the veterans that fought and the active duty military people that are fighting and supporting our nation. I tell you, I see our veterans, and this past Memorial Day was no different than any other. You get to see these great men and women, and you see their hats, and they have their towns on them, like Selinsgrove and Sunbury and Tunkhannock and Williamsport, and you can go up to Gailton, and you see the American Legions and the VFW posts, and they're all proud of their towns because that's where they came from, that's where they were raised. And when they go to defend freedom and help people all across the globe that are victims of oppression from governments that are not like ours, as exceptional as ours, those people don't know where Selinsgrove and Tunkhannock and Williamsport is, but when that flag shows up, they know the United States of America is coming to help them. They know that the best force for good ever on the face of this earth is coming to help them. And we should respect that flag, and we should respect the service of the men and women who have our uniform on and who are wearing the uniform of our country and fighting under that flag. And we should respect that flag every day. I learned that from my dad, who's a Korean War veteran, and my brother, who was in the Army for 29 years. And we should not tolerate people that don't respect the flag.
Up next, we have Richard Kickendahl from Towanda. Hopefully I got your last name correct, sir, but you are live with the Congressman. Thank you for holding.
All right, you're pretty close. But my question is the southern border. I mean, we're letting everybody through there, and nobody seems to be trying to stop it. Why can't we impeach President Trump and Harris for not doing a thing? Here we got our sailors and service members all over the different countries protecting their borders, and we can't even protect our own because our president doesn't seem to care about it. But that's his job, protect our borders, and he's not doing it. So let's get him out of there. Just try to anyway. and get somebody in there that will protect our borders, or at least slow things down until it can be corrected, instead of just letting people through the way they are now.
Richard, I appreciate your comments, and the thing I'll say, because the United States has to have borders. I was just at a press conference with Representative Jody Arrington, and he's from Texas. And I know some people say, well, Fred, what are you doing down at the southern border? Pennsylvania's a border state. Well, with the fact that people that are coming across our border and their first act is illegally entering our country are being shipped to states all across the country. There's some in Pennsylvania. That makes every state a border state. And the other point I made during the press conference is that if there was a crisis in Pennsylvania, I know that Americans from Texas and Arizona and Florida and across this nation would help us in Pennsylvania. And right now, we have a crisis at our southern border. We have, and we've done many things to hold the administration accountable for this. Our trips to the border, our letters to the administration, legislation that has been introduced. But our republic works in the fact that when you're in a majority, you control the hearings in the committees, and it comes down to getting enough votes to get this legislation done. And we're working on that. We're working on in Congress to hold the administration accountable to do its job, and that means protecting our southern border. That's in our Constitution. It's Article 4 of the Constitution about protecting our borders. So we are going to. You have my word on. I'm going to do everything that I can within my power to make sure that we hold the administration accountable to doing its job. And it's unfortunate that the Vice President, instead of going to talk to the people that are living near, the American citizens that are living near, like the Johnsons and the Hoopers and the people that I met with, and the sheriff in Luna County, New Mexico, and the Border Patrol agents. It's one thing to stop at the processing center, which I was at the processing center that the Vice President was too, but when I was there, they had actually buses in the parking lot. And I asked the one person there, I said, now are there fewer people in here because fewer are coming across the border, or is it that they're being transferred out more quickly? And his answer was they're being transferred out more quickly. There were two groups of individuals that were leaving that day that came across our border, whether they were unaccompanied minors, family units, that the Customs and Border Patrol was putting on buses and taking to Health and Human Services other sites within Texas and New Mexico. So you got the commitment that I will do everything I can within the power of the law to hold accountable the administration to do their job, not just on this issue, but on all issues.
Congressman, we have a lot of questions coming in, both online and on the phone this evening. And if you have a question and you're joining us via telephone that you'd like to ask the Congressman, simply press *3 on your telephone keypad. Or if you're streaming this event on the website, simply type your name and question right below the streaming player. Let's go to Brenda Terrell from Union, who's on the line with you. Hi, Brenda. You're live with the Congressman. Thank you for calling.
Thank you. And thank you, Congressman Keller, for the invitation this evening. I have a question about why the Republicans don't do a better job of defending their efforts to improve election integrity, such as in Georgia. The Democrats just seem to do a better job of getting their propaganda out in the news, on TV, in the newspapers, and I don't see or hear much by the Republicans talking about how that is in fact propaganda and their desire to just be in power for the rest of our lives.
Well, Brenda, thanks for calling in, and thanks for your question. A couple things I'd like to say is I know we use a lot of social media platforms to put out information regarding whether it's voter ID or any legislation pending or passing or have passed through Congress or things we're working on. And I know there's a lot of members of Congress that have written op-eds and been on TV. You got to get the bookings from the media outlets. I mean, that's one thing. But I'll say this, and I think that the people that are trying to paint this as some kind of whatever you described it as on suppression or whatever. That's not the case. We think every legal vote should count, and when votes that aren't cast properly count, then that certainly isn't fair to the people that followed the rules. And I will give a shout out to my colleagues, Seth Grove, or my former colleague, Seth Grove, who actually had a series of hearings in Pennsylvania, because this is a state's issue to run elections. The federal government, Speaker Pelosi passed H.R. 1, they call it For the People Act. It's actually For the Politicians Act. If you read that bill, it's federal funding of campaigns, it's federalization of campaigns. But Seth Grove did it right. They had a series of 14 hearings in Harrisburg. They did a report, they introduced legislation, and then Governor Wolf goes to have a press conference. But here's what Seth Grove did. He showed up at the press conference, and he said, if the governor's not willing to talk to us in Harrisburg, I'll come to where he is. And that's the things that you're starting to see as far as being creative to make sure that we can do this. The voting laws in Georgia are more generous than they are in Delaware, the president's home state. And I think they need to take a look at this and really be honest about what's going on. We allow for people to vote, but there should be measures that you can make sure that everybody has confidence in the vote that takes place in an election. So I would say that there's a lot that we do on social media. There's a lot of interaction we have with the press. Unfortunately, we can't control the headlines. We don't write them. But I would just say that I think the American people are a lot smarter than some of the people on the other side are giving you credit for. Because I'm just this guy that grew up in central Pennsylvania and worked in a factory and ran a business. And I tell you what, I know how smart people are. And Brenda, you're seeing it, and I think a lot of other people are too.
Up next, Congressman, calling in from Susquehanna County is Shane. Hi, Shane. I appreciate you joining us this evening. You're live with the Congressman.
Hi, Congressman. Thanks for making time for us this evening. My question is, natural gas is a wonderful resource for those of us in Northern Tier, Susquehanna, and Bradford County. There's a lot of benefit to the property owners. What I'm wondering is, in the infrastructure bill, will any provisions be made to use that in the local communities, as most of that natural gas is being shipped out of state to other communities to use for fuel? Meanwhile, those of us that live within the county are not getting the benefit to use that less expensive fuel and still have to burn fuel oil and things of that nature.
Okay, Shane, thank you. I appreciate that. And the one thing I'd like to say is I appreciate your comments and making time, but I tell you what, I'm glad you're all making time for me because me and the team that helps me represent PA 12, we work for you. So I just appreciate your kind words. As far as the infrastructure, that's why I include natural gas pipelines as part of infrastructure because when you're looking at the distribution and transmission of that resource, it's going to take pipelines. And we need to do that so that it can be realized by the property owners or the people that rent homes or own their home in rural Pennsylvania. I know there's been some initiatives. Senator Yaw, who represents part of Susquehanna County, has also had initiatives in Pennsylvania to get natural gas to the last mile. So, yeah, that is part of infrastructure. That will be helpful. And I will say, even though people may not have natural gas, it still helps lower the cost. I know that's not the answer to get it there. We're working on that. That's part of infrastructure. That's part of making sure that we have the transmission and distribution pipelines to make sure we get that to the rural communities.
Our next caller is from Lewisburg, Congressman. Eric Jones on the line. Hi, Eric. Thank you for holding. You're live with the Congressman.
Hi, thank you. Congressman Keller, just one quick point of clarification. You mentioned that Georgia's election laws are, much more lax than what the president's own laws are in Delaware. But Georgia is a state that has a Republican legislature, both in their state Senate and their state House, and a Republican governor. So I think you're a bit misguided in some of your claims there. That being said, as a lifelong conservative and a resident of PA 12, I want to know what it is that you are actually doing day in and day out to move our economy forward from being a $15 economy based on sheet stores and actual economic growth.
Well, I guess, Eric, I would say the first thing on the election law, and maybe you can send me an email that shows me where the laws are different and more friendly in Delaware than they are in Georgia. So I would say that I'd be willing to have that discussion. I don't know that we can cover that on the phone here tonight. The other thing I would say, as far as the economy, it's about getting America going. It's about what we saw with the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, where more money was invested in America, and we were bringing those supply chains back to the United States. And what we need to do is we need policies that incentivize investment in America, and that doesn't happen through higher taxes. That doesn't happen through more regulation. What that happens is when you work together, private industry, and you don't have government putting burdens on and taxing governments so that they move those economies and those businesses out of the country. Like I said, we saw that happening like never before in 2019 after the Tax Cut and Jobs Act. And we need to incentivize the fact that being successful in America is not a bad thing. As long as people are doing it right, we should be wanting people to emulate that. And we need to put policies in place, and that's what I'm working on every day when I'm meeting with people that go to work every day. They just want an opportunity to earn for their families. And I tell you what, the best thing we can have is where people are making things and competing for that labor and raising the wages. And that way everybody's wages go up, not just a select few that are chosen by politicians when you raise a minimum wage.
Let's go back to some of our online questions, Congressman. This one from Steve in McAllisterville. Steve writes, police officers are quitting across the country because of calls to defund the police. Crime in major cities is on the rise, and without more officers, he's concerned it's just going to get worse. What are you doing to oppose this dangerous movement in Congress?
Well, the thing I would say is, first off, I want to say thank you to everybody that puts on a uniform and keeps us safe in our communities, in our homes, and across our great nation. One thing we need to do, and there was actually Senator Scott and Pete Stauber in the House actually had a bill that would have addressed that. Unfortunately, the Speaker didn't want to bring the bill up, which would have actually given the police officers the tools they needed. Whether education, furthering education, best practices, community policing, a whole bunch of issues that we'd have been able to do, and given the police the resources to do the job. So every day I'm continuing to work on policy and work with my colleagues, whether it's in the Senate or the House, to advance policies where our police have the tools, the education, and the support they so badly need to get their job done. And if somebody isn't doing their job properly in law enforcement, the people that want them held accountable the most are the vast majority of police officers to go out and do the job exactly the way it's intended to be done every day.
Another online question, Congressman, this one from Molly in Troy. She writes, please do not tie the bipartisan infrastructure plan with unnecessary pork. We desperately need improved roads, bridges, and broadband in Bradford County.
Yeah, Molly, thank you for the question. All of PA 12 has outstanding communities. I'm very familiar with Bradford County and Troy. I've got a lot of friends there. And a lot of the concerns that you have about the additional spending that's not necessary, that isn't part of infrastructure being put into the bill, I have those concerns. Because right now, because of the additional government spending, we're seeing inflation increase, which means it's hurting the very people that can afford it the least, whether it's gas prices, grocery prices. And if the government continues to do those kind of things, we're going to see that continue to happen. Where more money's put out, we're not getting things produced. So I will do everything I can to support policies that define infrastructure clearly as what infrastructure is. And if we want to have the discussion on the social programs and how we do those things, I'm willing to have that discussion too. But we need to make sure that when we're talking about legislation and policy, we're clearly defining what the goal is and what we're funding as a government. And you got my commitment, as all of PA 12 does, is that I will continue to make sure that that's how I conduct myself and do business on behalf of the people of PA 12.
Congressman, we have Tim Dressler on the line right now. Good evening, Mr. Dressler. Thank you for calling.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to hear you guys doing this. Thank you. I'm concerned about something as technically legally minute as Chevron deference. I find that with every administrative agency that's taking the power from the legislature that represents me, I put you in office, you vote, and we get a law. They don't do that anymore. They give the ATF, the FCC, the FAA, they give them the right to sidestep Congress and make laws. We've seen it with the BATF, and now we have a new possible leader of the ATF who is a rabid anti-Second Amendment supporter. They'll be able to use the Chevron deference to say, today this is legal, tomorrow we declare it illegal. Those laws were not voted on by Congress. Congress has given up their right to make the laws and given it to administrative agencies who use Chevron deference when they're standing before the judge. We saw that rejected with the 6th Federal Appeals Court ruling in the last 2 months, but nothing happens because they've already ordered companies to destroy products. And no matter what you think about some of the things, guns or this gun, that gun, high-capacity semi-automatic guns, the legislature should be making laws. You shouldn't have the law that's law today, and then they say it's null and void tomorrow, and then they say, no, it is, it's okay, they back and forth. And the ATF agents, or any other administrative office agent, basically redoes the law whenever they want to.
Yeah.
What can be done? What do the legislators? They don't have judicial authority, but your legislators. So what is happening there? Is anybody watching this?
Yeah, Tim, thank you for your question. That is an important thing that I worked on when I was in Harrisburg, and I've brought the same rules to when I'm here in D.C. When we pass legislation, we need to be very, very careful that it's specific, and we're not ceding that authority to agencies that are not elected to make regulations. We hear a lot about it with executive orders. If there's an executive order to carry out the intent of the law, that's one thing. If there's an executive order from the president to change a law or make law, then that's totally different. And that's some of the things that as we move forward, and I would hope that with a Republican majority after the 2022 election, that we would be able to rein back in some of that stuff. And as we pass laws, we look at it and say, this is the authority you have, and any other authority, you need to come to Congress. It is really, that's a huge part where the executive branch of government tends to get too big, and some of that power, as you're correct, over the years has been ceded to the executive branch from the legislative branch, and we need to make sure we reel that back in.
Up next, we have Warren O'Connell on the line from Sealands Grove. Good evening, Warren. Thank you for holding for the Congressman. You're live. Go right ahead.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Keller, for your service. My question to you is due to the border situation and how the American tax dollar is going to house, to feed, to medical, for all these illegals, what about the vets, the homeless people here in our state of Pennsylvania? When is anybody going to come and help them?
Warren, that's a really good point, and it's one that I look at, and that's why I was down to the border to take a look at the situation there and understand all the money that is being spent, Americans' money that is being spent either through tax dollars or money we have borrowed that is going to have to be repaid by our kids and grandchildren to deal with this issue that, quite frankly, was under control with the policies put in place by President Trump. And you hit the nail right on the head. We should be spending this money more, and it's not that we're not sympathetic to people in other nations, but it's just like when you're on an airplane. If you don't take care of yourself first, you're not going to help anyone else. And the first people we need to take care of is our veterans. And as I mentioned earlier on the call, my dad was a Korean War veteran. My brother was in the Army for 29 years. And I tell you what, I learned a lot about the sacrifice that our veterans gave for all of humanity, and that needs to be our priority. And question I would ask the president and the vice president is, when do they think the rights of the people that their first act of coming in our country was breaking our laws end, and the rights of our veterans and American citizens who obey the law begin? Quite frankly, the rights of our veterans and people who obey the law and American citizens, they begin before somebody that broke the law to get into our country.
Up next, Congressman, we have Joanna calling in. Joanna Paisani, I believe. Did I get that correct, ma'am?
Well, that's close enough.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Congressman Keller, thank you for your service. I have a question about two things. What are the Republicans doing about voter ID in Pennsylvania, and critical race theory?
Well, Joanna, as far as the voter ID, Seth Grove, the chairman of the State Government Committee, has actually had the hearings, and they've introduced legislation, and they're trying to advance that. Again, I don't think it's bad to say, hey, we need to make sure that everybody has confidence in the election. When I was in Harrisburg, I actually supported a voter ID law where PennDOT would give out free IDs for people to vote. It would at no cost. I shouldn't say free, at no cost to the person receiving it. Of course, taxpayers funded it, but it was no cost to the person receiving it. So I do support that, and I know they're working on things in Harrisburg to deal with the things that we make sure that everybody has confidence in the election. So that's really important. And the critical race theory, I tell you what, I think we need to focus on not what divides us, but what makes us the same as Americans. And we're all American citizens. We're Americans. What binds us together and gives us that common goal? I don't look at people's outward appearance. I look at us all as people. We're individuals. We all come together. Whether we have different color hair, different color eyes, it doesn't matter. Different color skin, it doesn't matter. We're all Americans. Everybody should be treated with dignity, and we should be teaching our kids how exceptional the United States of America is. While we've had flaws in our history, we have the greatest nation on the face of the earth. We did some things that we shouldn't have done, but we fixed that. We made a more perfect union. We took things, and we have done more for humanity than any other nation on the face of the earth. And we should be celebrating what makes it so great. Well, and I just ask other people that, why do so many people want to come to America? They want to come to America because they realize how special it is here, and how good we are as a nation. And if there's some people that aren't behaving properly, they need to be held accountable. But let's not say that's the vast majority of people, because I don't believe that. That's not the people I represent. I don't represent people that have hate in their hearts. I don't represent people that look down on anyone. I represent people that say we're all Americans, and we're gonna get through this pandemic together. We're gonna make the country better for our kids and our grandkids. That's the people I represent, and that's what we need to be teaching our youngsters.
Up next, we have Cosette Stoltzfus. Thank you for holding, ma'am. You're live with the Congressman. Thank you for calling.
Yes, hi. My question is, why, oh why, can't we have a clean bill passed in Congress without all the extra things on it? And what can we as American citizens do to make that happen?
Well, I'll say this, and that's one of the thing I look at with these bills. A lot of times, and I'm seeing it this year in Congress. A lot of bills are messaging bills to get people on record. They supported this, they didn't support that. What I would say is make sure that you hold people accountable to do what they say they're going to do. I look at this as these bills that are more than one subject. In Harrisburg, they actually have a rule. It's a single subject rule, other than the appropriations bills. But I agree with you. We should be making sure, and they actually came close to that under John Boehner in 2011. So when we look at this, that's a change I would love to see. I've had that discussion with people, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that we start making these bills so that they're not containing so many different things in it that somebody's trying to message and stick something in there so they get it done and try and slide it under the wire. So I would say the best thing that you can do is make sure that the people you represent, and believe me, I understand that very well, but if you have family, friends, and neighbors that live in different parts of the country, make sure that they have their voice heard too. But I am working, that's a priority of mine because I saw how beneficial that is when I was in Harrisburg, and I certainly am working towards that in Washington, D.C.
Let's go back to a couple of our online questions, Congressman. First, Christine from Williamsport says or writes, "It's unconscionable that we're paying for our kids to be taught critical race theory in schools. Please fight against this."
Christine, thanks for the question. And as I said earlier, the United States of America, the greatest country that's ever been on the face of the earth and has done more for humanity than every other nation, needs to be teaching our children how special it is to have United States citizenship, because there are so many people that work so hard to get here. And if we weren't such an exceptional nation, we wouldn't see what people are doing to try to come in and be part of the American dream. So, Christine, I will do everything I can to make sure that we let everybody know how great it is to be an American citizen and live in the greatest country in the world.
And Congressman, I know you've touched on this a couple times this evening, but Thomas from Mifflinburg wrote, "Where do you stand on stronger voter ID laws?"
Again, what we need to look at with our voter ID, and Thomas, I thank you for the comment or the question. Again, elections, according to the Constitution, are to be run by the states, and that's constitutional. And having a state, and when I was in Harrisburg, I supported voter ID where the government would have provided at no cost to the voter an ID card, a photo ID card. That doesn't cut anybody out, and I to suggest that somebody isn't able to get that, if we can take a look at that, I'd be more than willing to look at that. But when the government's willing to provide one for people, I think we should examine how we make sure everyone has confidence in the elections, and that means making sure that every legal vote counts, and that's how our democracy works, our republic works. So, I just think that we need to support our legislators in Harrisburg that are trying to advance some law that makes sense, and then the people will have their voices heard.
So we've got time for another call on the phone. We've got Robert Janeski, holding from Tioga County. Hi, Robert. Thank you for calling in with your question. You're live with the Congressman.
Thank you, and thank you, Congressman, for your service. My question is, a few years back, the NRA was pushing for concealed carry at a federal level so I could travel within the contiguous United States with the same permit I have in Pennsylvania. Is there any more movement on that, since states like Virginia and obviously New York State don't recognize other states' permits? Because it really limits your safe travel if you're going to other states to protect yourself, or be incarcerated just for having a gun you're legal with in one state and not in another. Thank you much.
Robert, thank you for your question. Yeah, actually, the way it works is states' attorney generals negotiate reciprocity with other states, meaning that you can travel in certain states and they recognize a concealed carry permit from Pennsylvania. I know that was part of a bill Senator Toomey was working on at the time with Senator Manchin. I support universal reciprocity. Law-abiding citizens who have a concealed carry permit should be able to travel within the United States. Now, each state has a sovereign right. They make laws. So we're actually, that is something that I don't see happening in this Congress, unfortunately, with the way things are. With a Republican majority in 2023, I'd be optimistic that we could get we could get that through Congress. However, we're going to have the issue of making sure that it gets signed into law by the president. So it is one of those things that the right of a person to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And actually, the Pennsylvania Constitution, I think, says it very well. Article 1, Section 21 says, "In defense of oneself or the state, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be questioned." Here again, it's about law-abiding citizens and making sure they have the right to do what's guaranteed to them, rights given by our Creator, guaranteed in our Constitution, and paid for by our veterans. So that is one thing. As the opportunity arises, I continue to fight for that, and if we can get it across the finish line, I'm more than willing to do that.
Up next, Congressman, we have Mary Pinero on the line from Perry. Hi, you're live with the Congressman. Appreciate you holding, ma'am.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, Fred. I appreciate Keller. I appreciate all you've done as a congressman. I see a lot of good things coming out of your office there. My question is, as an American citizen, how can I help to get my vote? I felt like my vote was not counted, and I want to know what I can do as an American citizen to make my vote count. What can we do? I feel like our hands are tied at this point.
Well, hi, Mary. Thanks for the call and the comment. The one thing I would say is, be engaged with, and I'm going to say this, in voting laws. You have the Voting Rights Act, which is, federal laws about, how, guide rails on how things do. But the voting laws, as far as how signatures are checked and everything's matched, is done at the state level. So I would say participate in elections. Making sure that you vote in every election, and if there's a candidate you support, whether it's Republican or Democrat or whomever, but independent, support that candidate. Do the work you would do, but also make sure that the people that work for you, myself, and in Perry County it'd be Perry Stambaugh and Senator DeSando. Make sure that everybody is aware. Your commissioners. I mean, you've got great representation in Perry County. Make sure that everybody understands where you are on this, and work with them to get these policies in place. But the main thing is for everybody to stay engaged and active, because there's so many people in this world that don't have the opportunity to vote, and it's quite exceptional here in the United States of America.
Well, that is going to conclude the time we have for the question and answer portion of today's event. We appreciate everybody's participation. And if we didn't have a chance to answer your specific question, or if you have additional thoughts, or if you'd like to sign up for important updates, please visit Congressman Keller's website. Very simply, keller.house.gov. Additionally, you can keep up with Congressman Keller on Facebook at Congressman Fred Keller, and Twitter at Rep. Fred Keller. Congressman Keller, appreciate you hosting this telephone town hall, and I'll turn it back over to you for a few closing remarks.
Thank you, and I appreciate the help with you moderating the event this evening. I would just like to say, thank you to the thousands of people from across central and northeastern Pennsylvania for joining us in this call this evening. I appreciate you taking the time to be part of this event. Everyone's participation in these events helps our team stay on track and represent your interest and values in Congress. If you didn't get an answer to your question because you weren't able to ask it, if you have any other feedback, please feel free to contact me and my team by going to keller.house.gov/contact. Our team, it's actually your team works for you, the people of PA 12. We thank you, and we wish you all the best for the rest of your evening. Take care.